Hey everyone, Janessa here from the blog Almost Heaven Homesteading.com, and today I want to share with you what a sourdough starter is, as well as take you along for my go-to weekly sourdough bread recipe. Sourdough bread is a staple in my kitchen and a favorite for my little family. I use it in so many different ways and with so many delicious recipes. But of course, behind every loaf of sourdough bread is a bubbly, active jar of sourdough starter sitting on the counter alive and ready to be used. Meet Herman. Yes, he has a name because, like I said, he's alive. Herman was started about 3 years ago, which means some of the flour and water in this jar is 3 years old. So you might be wondering, how did it not spoil 2 years, 11 months, 3 weeks, and a few days ago? So a sourdough starter is basically just a mixture of flour and water that has been discarded and fed over a period of about 7 days. Over those 7 days, it will start to harness some of the natural yeasts that are occurring in the flour and that are floating around in the air, and it will turn into a form of wild yeast, basically, that is full of good lactic acid bacteria. And because of all of that good bacteria, sourdough bread is way healthier for you to eat than bread that you would buy at the store, or even bread that you would make at home with the commercial yeast. And that is because when you add a little bit of sourdough starter to your bread, not only does it leaven the bread, but it also ferments the grains. That makes them far easier to digest because it starts to break them down for you, and it also makes the nutrients in your bread far more readily available. Alright, so where do you even get a sourdough starter? Well, you could buy a sourdough starter online. There are different sources where you can find that. But if you're like me and you like to do things at home, kind of like have that DIY nature, and you want to start your sourdough starter at home, that is actually pretty simple. It's not as hard as it might sound. So first of all, you will need all-purpose flour. I like to use organic, filtered water, a glass jar, and a wooden spoon. Now, little disclaimer here right at the beginning. You are looking for more of a pancake batter consistency here when you are creating your starter, more so than going with exact measurements. I'm going to give you the rough measurements, but just look for that pancake batter consistency more so than being exact with the measurements. So, day one, you will want to combine 1 cup of flour and 1/2 cup of water, and you're going to stir that well with the wooden spoon, and you're just going to let that set for 24 hours. After that, for the next 3 days, you are going to discard half of that mixture, and you're going to refeed it about 1 cup of flour and 1/2 cup of water. Again, you're going for the pancake batter consistency here. After those 3 days of discarding and feeding once a day, then for the next 3 days, you are going to do the same exact thing, except you're going to do it twice a day. When I made mine, I did this in the morning and the evening. So you will discard half as normal, feed about 1 cup of flour and 1/2 cup of water, and let it set. But then in the evening, you're going to do the same thing. So you're discarding and feeding twice. At that point, after about the 7-8 day mark, you should definitely be well on your way to a stabilized starter. And you will know that it is stabilized and ready to go if it is active and bubbly, and if it has kind of like a yeasty, tangy, sour smell to it. Another method that you can use to test if it is ready to go is to get a little glass of water, just room temperature water, and drop about a tablespoon of your starter into the water and see if it floats. If it floats, you are good to go and it is stabilized. If it's not quite there, you might want to continue discarding and feeding for a couple more days. And also, just a little side note here, if your kitchen is pretty cool, it might take a little bit longer, whereas if your kitchen is warmer, I would say the 7 days would be plenty of time to get that starter stabilized. Part of my weekly routine to make sure we have good, fresh food in our home is bread baking. This is a recipe I'm making every single week to make sure we have bread in our home that I know is made from good ingredients. This bread is made of flour, water, and salt. That's it. Nothing added, nothing extra, nothing unnecessary. Just the basics. Because this recipe is given by weight, you will need kitchen scales. To start, add your bowl and be sure to zero the kitchen scales out so that it's easier to calculate. Combine 700 grams of all-purpose flour and zero out your scales again, and add 250 grams of whole wheat flour and combine those well. At this point, you'll need to warm 750 grams of water on the stove. I like to just go ahead and add my teapot to my scales, zero it out, and add the water directly to the teapot. And go ahead and just warm that on the stove. You do not want this to be hot, but just a little bit warm is going to be perfect. Of course, you could heat this in a saucepan as well, but I find it easier to just measure this out right into my teapot. Go ahead and add that water straight into those two flours that you combined, and you're going to want to gently mix this, and it's going to set on the counter for 30 minutes after this gentle mix. Be sure that it's well combined, but don't overwork the flour. This is a process called autolyse, which helps for the flour to fully absorb the water before moving on to the next steps. At this point, after 30 minutes has passed, go ahead and place your dough back on the kitchen scales and of course zero it out. Add in 200 grams of that active bubbly starter. Remember, this should be fed about 5 to 12 hours ahead of time. However long it takes for your starter to be active and bubbly is what you need to do. Add in those 200 grams of starter. And after that, go ahead and grab a smaller bowl to measure out 20 grams of sea salt. That's also going to be added to the dough. Go ahead and sprinkle in those 20 grams of salt and begin mixing this. This is a no-knead recipe, but you do want to make sure that all of these ingredients are incorporated very well. So you'll probably be mixing this for 2 to 3 minutes just to make sure that everything is well combined. It will be a very wet dough and it won't feel like it's going to turn into a loaf at all, but through the stretch and fold process coming up a little later, you will see that it does start to form a nice dough that's workable. After all of those ingredients are well combined, you're going to want to let the dough set on the counter for 20 minutes before the first stretch and fold. After those 20 minutes, you will perform the first set of stretch and folds where you will pull up one side of the dough as high as you can and fold it back over the dough, and then repeat that on the other 3 sides just like you did the first side. This is something that you're going to do 6 times in total. In between each stretch and fold, you want to have it setting for about 20 minutes. you will notice that the dough gets more firm with each stretch and fold and starts to form that loaf that you're looking for. After you have completed that final stretch and fold, go ahead and just cover your dough and let it set on the counter for 6 to 10 hours for a bulk ferment at room temperature. This quote is meant to be somewhat comical in this situation, however, it is true. Baking sourdough is a very long process, but it's so rewarding to slice into a steamy loaf and know it is something I can feel good about feeding my family. After that bulk ferment of about 6 to 10 hours, your dough should pretty much be doubled in size. Go ahead and gently transfer the dough to a floured surface and divide it into 2 sections. But be sure to be careful during this process to not pop any of the bubbles that you created during the stretch and fold. The dough will be pretty wet to work with. Be sure to keep your fingertips a little bit floured, and that will make it easier to work with. At this point, it's time to shape each of these loaves. To do this, you're going to roll the dough away from you and tuck the sides under, and try to create some tension in the loaf by doing this. Roll it around and tuck those sides under. You'll have to do this several times in a row to try to get that tension, but still with this, be careful to not pop any of those bubbles. Being gentle is key here. After you have those loaves shaped, lightly flour the top and let them set on the counter for 20 minutes to develop a nice skin on the outside. After those 20 minutes are up, you'll want to get your banneton baskets ready by flouring them lightly on the inside. Turn your loaf over and pull out one side and fold it over to the middle, and repeat with the other 3 sides so that all 4 sides are tucked into a nice ball. Go ahead and place that into the banneton basket with the folded sides out and put in the refrigerator for a bulk refrigerated rise of about 12 hours. After that refrigerated rise, go ahead and preheat a Dutch oven at 500 degrees for an hour. Once that Dutch oven is preheated, go ahead and transfer one of your loaves to a piece of parchment paper and lightly flour the top. Now it's time to begin scoring. I like to do a mixture of deep cuts and shallow cuts. You can see here I do kind of like a 4-edged star along each quarter of the loaf, and then I'm going to do some more shallow cuts within each quarter. Not only is it really pretty, but this is also going to help create that beautiful oven spring that you're going for, which is going to be that final rise in the oven, which gives you a crusty outside and a delicious, fluffy, soft inside. After you're done scoring and when your Dutch oven is preheated, immediately remove it from the oven and transfer the loaf to the Dutch oven. Then go ahead and add the lid and place back into the oven for 20 minutes at 500 degrees. After those 20 minutes, remove the lid from the Dutch oven and reduce the temperature to 475 degrees. Go ahead and bake your loaf for an additional 15 minutes. The crust will be nice and crispy at this point, so go ahead and remove it from the Dutch oven and let it cool for about an hour. Laura Ingalls Wilder said, "As the years pass, I am coming more and more to understand that it is the common everyday blessings of our common everyday lives for which we should be particularly grateful. They are the things that fill our lives with comfort and our hearts with gladness. Just the pure air to breathe and the strength to breathe it. Just warmth and shelter and home folks. Just plain food that gives us strength. The bright sunshine on a cold day and a cool breeze when the day is warm. Think on these things today to find beauty in your everyday life. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you join us here every week for more wholesome, self-sufficient, and handcrafted content."